Hello everyone. In this video, I'll be testing some of the most popular graphite pencil brands to find which ones are worth your time, money, and effort. I'll draw the same subject with each one so you can see how they perform. While I draw, I'll go over what I liked, what didn't quite work, and what you should know before picking any of these up. The brands I tested are Faber-Castell 9000, Staedtler Mars Lumograph, Staedtler Mars Black, Koh-I-Noor, and Gioconda Paris. Let's get started. We begin this review with Staedtler, which is a well-known brand and the one I've used the most so far. The set I tested included the full range, from 10H to 12B, however I must say that in this comparison, it didn't really stand out. The pencils felt smooth at first, but as I shifted angles, it picked up a scratchiness that made layering difficult and less predictable. While that was disappointing, the pencil held a decent point through the whole hour I spent on this drawing, and they were very buildable, though I had to rely on the higher B grades to reach the darkest values, unlike with other brands. Blending with them was decent, however due to the graphite inconsistency some visible marks were left behind in certain areas which were the product of the pencil's scratchy side. And they didn't blend even though I used a brand new blending stump. That said, it is a rare occurrence that I think happened only in this scent since all the previous ones I've used had never disappointed me. The wood casing was excellent as always, it was firmly bonded to the graphite core, which was strong, presenting no breakage at all while sharpening. Since they are not overly expensive, getting the full range could be worth it, especially for architecture and technical drawing, but I'd personally recommend sticking to the B grades if you're planning on using them for art. The next brand on the list is Faber-Castell, specifically the 9000 graphite pencil line. The set I tested came in a classic green 12-piece tin, covering grades from 2H to 8B. These pencils were surprisingly easy to control, even in the softer grades. I was able to maintain a sharp point in the 4B to 6B range throughout the entire drawing, which made detail work and soft shading noticeably smoother. They feel soft and smooth without that scratchy texture some brands get, especially in the H range, and they erase cleanly without leaving behind smudgy marks or damaging the paper. I found the cores very buildable, holding up well over multiple layers without sealing the paper or oversaturating the surface. However, the wood casing was a bit of a letdown. I experienced a few internal breakages while sharpening, which was frustrating considering how well the graphite itself performed. This has happened before with other batches too, so it's definitely something to note. There's also a bit of sheen when you start layering heavily, but it's far less noticeable than in other brands I tested. Overall, Faber-Castell 9000s are affordable, reliable, and great for both beginners and more experienced artists. If you don't mind being a little more careful when sharpening, they're absolutely worth having in your kit. Next up is Staedtler Mars Lumograph Black, a pencil line specifically made to reduce that annoying graphite shine, and they were definitely interesting to work with. Right away, the laydown felt a bit scratchy and uneven, almost like charcoal, which honestly caught me off guard. Still, they blended better than I expected, and the layering held up nicely, even though the texture wasn't as smooth as I'd like. Some areas stayed visibly textured, even after blending with a fresh stump, and they were definitely harder to erase than regular graphite. That said, they lifted just fine in the parts that mattered, like the skin areas and the eye I was working on, so it didn't ruin the piece or anything. What really stood out is the lack of sheen. These pencils are completely matte, and the values were super deep, which looked great on camera and under light. The wood casing was also really solid and sharpened cleanly, but the core felt a bit brittle under heavy pressure. Not a deal breaker, but it's something to keep in mind if you press hard or use burnishing a lot. Overall, I'd definitely recommend trying them. They're not too expensive, and they're amazing for shadows, photography, or scan-friendly pieces. Just don't expect them to behave like normal graphite, and don't mix them with it without practicing first. Now let's talk about Koh-I-Noor, which honestly wasn't quite what I expected. I've heard a lot of good things about this brand, especially from other artists, but when I tested them myself, there were quite a few things I didn't love. First, the values came out noticeably lighter compared to the other brands I used, and the pencil felt a bit scratchy and inconsistent, especially in the softer grades. Even after layering and burnishing, it was difficult to get truly dark areas. That said, blending with them was amazing. The graphite went on smoothly, didn't smudge much, and left no noticeable marks after using a blending stump. In that sense, they were probably the most workable pencils out of the entire group. The wood casing started off decent, but after the first sharpening it went downhill. It began chipping, which eventually led to core breakage, and that kind of ruined the flow for me. It's a shame, because the blending experience was honestly so pleasant. I wouldn't buy them again, at least not for serious work. The price-to-performance ratio just doesn't make sense for what you get. Still, I'm glad I tried them. They were fun to test, even if they didn't earn a permanent spot in my kit. Last on the list is Koh-I-Noor Paris, a brand I only considered for this review because a well-known portrait artist swore by it. But after testing it myself, I've got to say, it wasn't what I expected. The pencils felt rough and a bit scratchy, especially when shading, and some of the grades came out way darker than they should have. That kind of inconsistency made it hard to layer or predict how each stroke would behave. They were buildable, but not in a satisfying way. Blending was tricky too, the graphite didn't spread evenly, and I had to work harder than usual to get smooth transitions. Erasing was difficult, and the tips wore down super fast, which made the drawing process feel a little clunky. The wood casing was okay at first, but I had a bit of chipping while sharpening, which definitely didn't help. On the plus side, the pencils are round and feel comfortable in hand, but they're not ideal if you're working on a tilted surface, they just roll away. Between the limited grade range and the price, I honestly wouldn't recommend these unless you're already familiar with the brand and like that rougher texture. For me, they were too expensive for what they offered, especially when there are smoother, more consistent options out there. And that's it for this graphite pencil test. As you can see, some of these brands delivered really smooth, consistent results, while others struggled with blending, smudging, or just didn't hold up under pressure. Here's a quick look at all of them side by side, and as I remove the tape, you can also see how each drawing reflects the light. That sheen, or lack of it, really does matter depending on how you plan to use your art, especially if you're scanning or photographing it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. You can look forward to more videos where I'll be trying different mediums and comparing them to each other. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.